All right, Rockfin, let's go ahead and get going. Doobie-doobie-doo. 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 I'm your host, sabrinasalvati. Doobie-doobie-doo. Salvati. Doobie-doobie-doo. 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 I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati. All right. Happy Tuesday, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Sabs podcast. I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati. If you are new, I want to let you know that Sabs podcast is a part of Revolutionary Blackout Network. You can meet me. You can watch me there Tuesday, Thursday, and Fridays. And you can catch me here Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday. Starting a little bit later tonight because Ryan Grimm's coming on. He'll be here around 9-ish. But I have two stories I want to discuss before that and one more after that as well. We will do call-in tonight. But to kick things off, shout out to everyone watching on YouTube, Rockfin, and Twitter. What is going on? Want to give quick shout outs to people in the chat. What's going on? Tori says, honey. She's got her popcorn and her tea there. Shout out to JB, my comrade from RBN. Hey, my sister from another mister. Hello, all. Please be sure to doobie-doobie-doo hit that button. That's right. Hit that like button, guys. What's going on? Rodrigo says Ryan Grimm is really good journalist. Imagine if he uses his journalism skills to defend the poor and the workers instead of politicians. Shout out to Bling Girl. Bernie, you caved again for your friend. We're going to get into that tonight. We are going to get into that. What's going on to Anthony, who is a Sabby member since Popcorn? Shout out to Lawrence, who is also a Sabby member, says that picture of Ryan Grimm is before he started growing the chia pet on his head. Oh, guys. Wow. Shout out to Hannah, says, okay, I'm here for it. What's going on? Ben, who's a Sabby member, says, I can't wait for this show. Greetings, dead people things. Bernie Madoff got 150 years. Hopefully SBF gets the same. They may wish to make an example out of him. Shout out to Dabby Dabs. Whoop, whoop. What's going on, Sabby fam? Almost Sabby time again. This is going to be a fun one. Thank you so much, Dabby Dabs. What's going on? Synthetics. Hey, Bernie, still waiting for Joe Biden to be the most progressive president in U.S. history? Shout out to Sean, says, yeah. What's going on, Gamer, says, hello. Greetings, Blue Moon Red Wine, says, hey, everybody. Shout out to Lorez, says, doobie-doobie-doo, sup, Sabrina, Eric, and Sabby fam. SBF caught quickly because he must have lost money for somebody powerful. We're going to get into that story as well. Shout out to Eric, who's a Sabby member, says, hey, all, here we go. Greetings, Danny, says, hashtag free SBF, question mark. Shout out to Crazy Boy. Hey, y'all, this should be interesting. Greetings, Bad Cookies. I bet you $5. Grimm only has 30 minutes to talk. Shout out to Robin, says, let's do this. And greetings, Casey, sends solidarity and fire. Yeah. So let's go ahead and do this, as Robin said. Want to give a quick shout out to everyone who is a Sabby patron. Guys, thank you so much for your support. If you are interested in being a Sabby patron, I have 5 categories: members, Sabbies, Sabsters, Sabinators, and of course, the ultimate. All of their names are listed here. You can also see their names scrolling across the bottom of the screen there on the ticker. Thank you guys so much. Really do appreciate that. Like I say, every time, you really do keep the lights on around here. All right, so let's go ahead and get started with our first story. This one is about Bernie Sanders. Now, I had already planned to talk about Bernie Sanders' interview that he had on CNN. And one of the topics that we are going to discuss is the defense budget, which Bernie did discuss. And it just so happened that literally right before I was about to go live, speaking of defense budget, something else happened in reference to Bernie Sanders. And I don't think you're going to like what I'm going to tell you if you have not seen that yet, but we're going to discuss it here because I do want to make a comparison. So let's go ahead and get into the first clip here. Shout out to Case Study QB for this clip. The first portion of this interview is discussing this plan that Joe Biden has to make South Carolina one of the early primary voting states. Bernie Sanders was interviewed about that strategy. So let's hear how Bernie Sanders feels about this. And I have some things to say because, South Carolina was incredibly important in reference to defining the race between him and we may as well just say just him and Joe Biden at that point. So let's go ahead and get into it.
Before I let you go, I want to ask about Iowa and New Hampshire. You're familiar with those states. You've been there many, many times in your presidential runs. They've always, at least in recent history, gone first in the primary calendar. But now Democrats are trying to move South Carolina first in the nominating calendar, a state I should note that you were beaten in twice. Would South Carolina first in the process be the right thing to do for Democrats?
Notice how she had to add in, you were beaten twice in South Carolina.
Well, this is a very much, Dana, inside the Beltway Democratic Party issue. And a committee has made a recommendation. I'm sure it's going to be debated a whole lot. I'm sure there are 50 states that want to go first. We will see what's happening. But my focus right now is trying to do what I can to make sure that Congress deals with many of the major issues facing working families. And that's what I'll be focusing on.
Before I let you go, I want to ask.
Notice he didn't really answer that question. And I have a theory about that. First and foremost, we need to talk about why are they trying to make South Carolina that first state? Let's remember that was the state that really changed the race for Joe Biden. He went on to win in South Carolina, and then he went on to win the whole shebang. So that's one factor. The other factor is there's more African-American votes to be acquired in South Carolina than there is in Iowa or New Hampshire. That's just a reality. The numbers don't lie. But what kind of Democratic voters are typically in South Carolina? Well, I went to college there, so I happen to know a lot. And I worked there for a couple of years after I graduated college. And from my experience, most of the Democrat voters in South Carolina tend to be more moderate Democrats, which would be the type that Joe Biden is going to be looking for. You notice they're not trying to make one of the first states California. They're not trying to make one of the first states Washington State or Oregon. There's a reason for that. There's more progressive voters in those states. They're not trying to make my state of Massachusetts one of the first states either. But you notice Bernie Sanders didn't really answer that question. And you have to ask yourself why. How does he feel about South Carolina becoming the first early primary voting state? He didn't really give an opinion. And this has to be somewhat painful for Bernie Sanders because, like I said, it was that state that changed the race between him and Joe Biden. That turned everything around after he had won Nevada, after he had won New Hampshire. Later on, we came to find out that technically he did win Iowa as well. That changed everything. And Bernie Sanders doesn't have a comment about it becoming the first primary state. This is Bernie Sanders once again trying to carry water for the establishment, trying to protect the Democratic Party. Now, I'm sure Bernie Sanders may not be keen on this, but is he going to say that on CNN? No. No. He knows better than to speak against Joe Biden. We're going to get into him not speaking against Joe Biden in just a second as well. So you have to ask yourself, why on earth would Bernie Sanders even hint at possibly running again for 2024 if he is not willing to push back on the very same establishment that he told all of us to push back on? And you also have to ask yourself, at this point in time, what is the purpose of having Bernie Sanders in the Senate as someone who is supposed to be a progressive, fighting for progressive policies and fighting for working class and poor people? At this point in time, what is the point? What is the purpose? My belief is that the purpose is to get Bernie Sanders to continue to funnel younger people, energize younger people who want change, who are passionate about climate change, to energize that base again and to keep them in the two-party system. And if you don't believe me, well, then you should ask yourself, why didn't Bernie Sanders take all of that energy that he had with the progressive movement? And we had the numbers. Why didn't he take that energy and start a third-party movement? Because at the end of the day, even Bernie Sanders doesn't want to break up the duopoly. You have to understand that. I have to make this very clear. At the end of the day, even though Bernie Sanders is a registered independent, he is not trying to disrupt the duopoly. He wants a little bit of forms here and there. He believes he can do this through the Democratic Party or push people left. How's that working out? But when it comes to complete change, when it comes to a complete overhaul of this system, Bernie Sanders is not actually trying to change the system. Not really, if you look at it. He believes that by operating in the duopoly as a progressive, you can bring about these reforms. But after everything that you've seen over the past couple of years, whether it was Bernie Sanders or whether it was the squad, why would Bernie Sanders still believe that at this point? And you also have to ask the question, at this point in his career, why would Bernie Sanders still carry water and cover for the establishment? Bernie Sanders can retire right now if he wants to. He's not choosing to do that. At this point, he could throw everybody under the bus and just leave. But he's still not willing to do that. Now, there's another part of this interview about the defense budget. I want you to hear what Bernie Sanders has to say about the defense budget that they just voted on, by the way, to give the military industrial complex more money. Listen to what he says.
The record-breaking $858 billion defense funding bill. The House passed that this week. The Senate is going to vote on it. You voted against the NDAA, the defense bill, last time around. Will you do so again?
Yes, I think I will. Look, we have 85 million Americans who have no health insurance.
Notice what he just said. Pay close attention to it.
Voted against the NDAA, the defense bill, last time around. Will you do so again?
Yes, I think I will.
He thinks he will. Shouldn't you know? If you're the progressive, what's there to think about? We don't need to give the military industrial complex any more money. We need to give money to the American people. We need to get everybody health care in this country. Over $800 billion going to the MIC. But Joe Biden will tell you we can't have Medicare for all because we can't afford it. But Bernie Sanders thinks he will. Let's go on.
Look, we have 85 million Americans who have no health insurance. We have 600,000 people who are homeless. We have a dysfunctional healthcare system, dysfunctional childcare system where working parents are paying $15,000 a year on average for childcare. We have got to start protecting the needs of working families. The Pentagon is the one major agency of government which has never been independently audited. There is massive waste and fraud and cost overruns within that agency. So I think we can have the strong defense that we need without spending the huge amount of money that we're currently spending on the military.
I want to.
Now, remember what he just said. So he called out the Pentagon for basically being corrupt. This is true. But you know what Bernie Sanders says and what he does are two different things. Because after this clip, I'm going to show you what he just did. And it's not in regards to the defense budget, but it is in regard to the MIC. So pay attention to that. Pay attention to this.
But I would tell you, Dana, I look forward very much to becoming chairman of the Health Education Labor Committee. And I want to tell you that in that job, I intend to do everything I can to lower the outrageously high cost of prescription drugs in this country. And we're going to take on the pharmaceutical industry. We're going to take on the insurance industry.
When I've been hearing Bernie Sanders say this for years. When are they going to do that? How are they going to do that? Because he's not explaining that either. They sure as hell aren't passing any legislation to do that, especially now that the Republicans will have control of the House come January. How? When? Shouldn't you be trying to do everything that you can right now before Republicans get control of the House in January? If you're really trying to do those things, you're going to take on the pharmaceutical industry. How? Where was the force to vote for Medicare for all from the progressive politicians? Strategy straight from the DSA handbook, but you're going to take on the pharmaceutical company. Doesn't tell you how, though. How are you going to take on this corruption and this corporate greed when you continue to support the very same corporate corrupt politicians in your own party? Is Joe Biden going to let you take on the pharmaceutical industry, knowing that he takes money from Big Pharma? That's Bernie Sanders' good friend. Is he going to let that happen? He going to let you do that, Bernie? You think Bernie Sanders is going to push back on Joe Biden? If you do, you'd be wrong. And I'm going to prove that point in just a second. Let's go on.
And try to end the situation where we are the only major country on earth that doesn't guarantee health care to all people. I remain very concerned, as I said, about child care. I believe that child care in this country should not only be affordable, it should be universal. We got to deal with student debt. There are enormous crises facing working families, and I hope that the United States Congress, perhaps in some instances in a bipartisan way, will have the courage to take on the billionaire class who are doing phenomenally well. Corporations enjoying record-breaking profits.
Why would Bernie Sanders have hope that a bipartisan House is going to be willing to take on billionaires when a lot of them are taking billionaire money? Most of them take corporate money. So why would Bernie Sanders think that they would actually do that? We couldn't even get the few squad members to force the vote for Medicare for all. We couldn't even get the few squad members to not supporting funding the police. We couldn't even get the few squad members to not support the Iron Dome. So why would Bernie Sanders think that all of a sudden, all these corporate politicians are going to be on board with pushing back against the billionaire class? Somebody please explain that to me. Why is he misleading the people here? Why is he doing this? What kind of gaslighting BS is this, man? Well, how can you say this to people, Bernie? How could you really get people's hopes up like this? You know damn well those politicians are not going to push back on corporations. They are not going to dismiss corporate interests. And the audacity of him to sit here and even give the American people some type of hope that that would even be possible. It is appalling to me. Absolutely appalling. Let's finish up.
Billionaire class who are doing phenomenally well. Corporations enjoying record-breaking profits while working people fall further and further behind. So to my mind, the issue is, will we stand with working families, take on big money? And that's what I hope to do in the next session.
But you guys didn't. But you guys didn't stand with working families. Listen, even when it comes to the railroad workers, you had Democrat senators that didn't even vote. You know that? I went over that on the show. There were Democrat senators that didn't even vote one way or the other. What are you going to do? You got another Democrat senator who did not support the sick leave, Joe Manchin. What are you going to do, Bernie? Now, Bernie Sanders, he's letting you know that he has a problem with the defense budget and that the Pentagon is corrupt. But I found out just a couple of minutes ago before I went live, Bernie Sanders caved again, not just to the MIC, but to Joe Biden. What am I talking about? Did you know Bernie Sanders was trying to bring forth some type of pressure to end the war in Yemen? He called for a resolution, which I agree with. It shouldn't be happening. End it. Stop it. People there are starving. People there are dying. And the U.S. government is complicit in that because the U.S. government gave Saudi Arabia the arms for Saudi Arabia to destroy people in Yemen. Something as simple as that is what he wanted to bring to the floor for a vote. Did that happen? No. Let me tell you why. Now, Ryan Grimm, like I said, Ryan will be here at 9. Ryan was actually the one who tweeted this out. Let me show you what happened. Watch this. The White House is whipping against Bernie Sanders' Yemen war powers resolution, urging a no vote this evening. Sources involved tell me. Now, he goes on to say here, Sanders called for a vote to be held Tuesday evening, that's tonight, December 13th. The White House, according to sources involved in the fight over the resolution, is urging senators to vote against the resolution. The White House is arguing that a vote in favor is unnecessary. Despite the lapse of ceasefire, significant hostilities have not yet resumed, and the vote will complicate diplomacy. When they say the White House, that means Joe Biden, just letting you know that. Let's go on. They are also arguing that Biden has made significant progress in reducing violence and reopening ports and airports, so his judgment should be respected and the resolution rejected. You guys see this, right? And finally, the White House has warned that some of the arguments being made could complicate the effort to back Ukraine in its war against Russia. In other words, we will continue to allow children to starve and die in Yemen. Let's go on. A White House spokesperson did not immediately respond to a request for comment. So there was that attempt to reach them there. Senator Chris Murphy, Democrat from Connecticut, chair of the Senate Foreign Relations Subcommittee with jurisdiction over U.S. support for the war, denounced the conflict in a series of statements posted online Thursday. So Bernie Sanders wanted to bring this to the floor for a vote, and he was urged by Joe Biden not to do so. And I say this, why would you come in and tell him not to even have the vote? What is he afraid of? Is Joe Biden afraid of the fact that the American people is going to be able to see who still wants to support that war in Yemen? That will start naming names? So I waited a bit to see if this was going to happen, this vote. Obviously, we know how Bernie would vote in this situation because he wants the resolution. And it's not just Bernie Sanders. Pramila Jayapal has also called for a resolution. Let me show you what happened. This is Ryan Grimm again. Dems caving to Biden pressure to vote no on Yemen WPR. Caving. Now he is retweeting Alex Schultz here. And he said, Ryan Grimm, who I know has been covering this Yemen resolution, Padilla is a no, and Feinstein's office isn't commenting, which doesn't bode well for her vote either. California senators falling in line with Biden. Now, there was a tweet also from Dave. Let me see. Did I add that one? I don't think I added that one. Let me go back and add that one. Give me just a minute. Dave. Oh, yeah, that's not me. Hold on. The Saudis are empire proxy against Yemen. Yeah, exactly. Let me pull up the tweet from Dave also. I want you to see what Dave DeCamp said. Here it is. Because Dave just goes right in for it. Oh, got it. Some friend you got there, Bernie. Yeah. So Dave DeCamp tweeted, Bernie Sanders caves into White House pressure. There will be no vote on the Yemen war powers resolution. What a coward. After he just had that interview on CNN complaining about the military budget, about the defense budget, complaining about the Pentagon. And just like that, he caved about any type of resolution. Caved. So how can you complain about the budget for the military industrial complex, but then you don't have the audacity to put an end to a conflict, or at least bring it to a vote to a conflict that the military industrial complex budget is supporting? Make it make sense. Make it make sense, people. By the way, you should check out Twitter in reference to this conflict because people are not happy with Bernie Sanders right now. Not happy. Now, here's the thing. I don't expect Joe Biden to be for this resolution. Don't expect it. But progressives do expect Bernie Sanders to be for the resolution and to bring it to the floor for a vote. Progressives expect Bernie Sanders to push back on the establishment Democrats, to push for peace. That's the problem. The problem that we have right now is that we have people like Bernie in DC, but they're not doing what they were supposed to do in reference to pushing back against the corporate Democrats at hand. This is more embarrassing. Do you get what I'm coming from? If Joe Biden did this, if it was Joe Biden says, oh, Joe Biden says, no, I don't want to deal with this. No, don't do it. We expect that. But when you have Bernie Sanders choose not to bring it to the floor for a vote because he got that pressure from a corporate Democrat like Joe Biden, that's worse. I don't know what else to say at this point. I really don't. And I don't know how people at this point can continue to make excuses for them. I really do not. How are you going to say in that interview you just said you're going to push back, you're going to fight against big pharma, you're going to fight against the oligarchs? Why would I believe you when you can't even fight against the people in your own party? Because I still consider Bernie to be a Democrat. Why would I believe you? Why would I believe that you're going to push back against corporations? You're going to push back against big pharma. You can't even push back against Joe Biden. So why would I believe you? This is a big problem that we have. This is a big problem that we have. And I just realized I did not present my thumbnail, did I? I did not. I am so sorry. Let's do that now. Okay. All right. So tonight, other stories we are going to cover is also, of course, Ryan Grimm will join around 9. We're going to discuss FTX CEO arrested. That broke last night. That is huge, by the way. We're going to discuss what we just discussed, Bernie questioned. And we're also going to discuss the World Cup alarm. So I need to tell you about what happened at the World Cup in reference to the workers. So sorry about that, guys. I just jumped right in. Neo, thank you so much for the super chat. Important point here is that Biden is obviously scared of a primary challenge, and we should mobilize now. You can't wait for Bernie to wake up. Could you do a live react to Neo's algorithm on YouTube, Sabs? I can do that. I can't do it tonight, but I can do that at some point in the future. Thank you so much for that. JB says Bernie Sanders is a Democrat with an I next to his name. Lawrence, he should retire. He serves no purpose in the Senate. He talks and talks and then votes the Democratic Party line. Thank you for the super chat, Staccato. I often used to find myself wondering if they threatened Bernie's family after 2016 to tame him. Someone has to say it out loud. I asked Chris Hedges about this, and Chris Hedges said, and also Jesse Ventura said this as well, that Bernie Sanders had already decided when he announced he was running in 2016 that he was going to support Hillary Clinton if he lost. He had already made that decision. Now, I wish Bernie Sanders would have told the rest of us about that, because I would have kept my money in my pocket. Thank you for the super chat, Oz. Bernie sold us down the river so he wouldn't become the next Ralph Nader. He's not talking on Shewit. Just despicable. Retire, sheepdog. I think at this point he needs to retire too. Blue Moon says, we're going to blah, blah, and going to blah, blah. Who is we? We is you. Thank you for the super chat, Kyle. Bernie don't walk the walk. Sell out. Him and his good friend, Joe. Synthetics. I guess they will have to write a strongly worded letter and apologize for it a day later. There's no coming back from this. Do you see it? Like, there's no coming back from this. Bernie Sanders, what do you tell the progressive base? What do you say to your followers right now? For the people who still believe in Bernie for some strange reason, what do you tell them? Thank you for the super chat, Black Freud. Hashtag Bernie, please retire. I agree. At this point, it's embarrassing. And people may say, oh no, we need to have him there. Do we at this point? If this is what he's going to do? Hold on, I got a thing. Oh, sorry. I thought that someone was trying to send me something. At this point, not worth it. Not worth it. Now, I want to go ahead on to our next story about the World Cup workers. You know, a lot of people are really excited about the World Cup. I have friends here who love soccer. I'm not really into soccer like that, but they love it. They've been waiting for this all year. They're all pumped up about it. World Cup brings in a lot of money, gets a lot of views, right? Internationally, soccer, or as some may call it, football, is popular internationally, although it may not be as popular in the United States. But when you watch the World Cup, I want you to think about the people, the workers that are actually the reason for this event even taking place to begin with. The workers who basically put everything together, built the event, so that people like you can sit back and enjoy watching it with your friends. And then I want you to know that those workers have not been treated well. Now, I want to give a shout out to Case Study QB for this clip. World Cup faces scrutiny over migrant workers. Again, these are migrant workers. Listen to this.
Boniface Barasa is back in Kenya, but says he's still suffering from trauma after 3 years as a construction worker in Qatar before the World Cup.
I saw the supervisor call another Kenyan less black monkey. Then when the Kenyan countered back, he asked him, why are you calling me black monkey? Then the supervisor slapped the Kenyan.
The 38-year-old is a lifelong football fan, but says he hasn't watched any matches. The pain is still too fresh.
So he's talking about here some of the racism that he's experienced there, just being a worker, just trying to do his job. And it's really interesting because it's not like there are no black players on some of these soccer teams. And some of the same people that will go and cheer in the stands for those players have no problem saying these kind of comments to the workers. And I want to be very clear about this. If it were not for the workers, you wouldn't have a World Cup. They built it. Let's go on.
Another one died on that harsh weather condition. One, my colleague died. Another one was beaten and he went missing.
You saw somebody die in front of you?
Yeah, somebody collapsed and died. And I think that was because of the harsh weather condition.
Because of the heat?
Because of the heat, the limited drinking water breaks.
Last month,
some of the migrant workers have died on the job because of the heat. And if any of you have ever worked in construction or you know someone that's worked in construction, unfortunately, even if it's really hot out, construction workers are still working. I've seen it here in Boston too, when we've had some of those days where it was 99 degrees or 100 degrees. The construction workers are still out there working in that heat. Let's go on.
the Qatar World Cup chief acknowledged that 400 to 500 migrant workers have died on projects connected to the tournament. As the World Cup got underway,
You guys heard that? Let's bring it back.
Because of the heat.
Because of the heat, the limited drinking water breaks.
Last month, the Qatar World Cup.
Limited water drinking breaks. It is very important that when you're working in those conditions that you stay hydrated. So if they're limited with water breaks, that's going to be a problem for them. To me, that doesn't make any sense. Let the people drink water. Why would you treat them that way? And another point that I want to address, again, these are migrant workers. This is a way for them to get cheap labor. They know they don't have to pay them that much. You see what I mean? Pay them less, treat them like crap, give them limited water drinks because they know that they can get away with doing it. Terrible, terrible.
Chief acknowledged that 400 to 500 migrant workers have died.
400 to 500 migrant workers have died. 400 to 500 migrant workers have died. A lot of people sitting at home ready to watch these games don't know this. They have no idea who the workers are. They're not hearing about these conditions. I'm surprised CNN covered this. But a lot of people going to the bars, watching these games, hanging out with their friends, like, yeah, cheering on their team, cheering on their country. 400 to 500 migrant workers have died. And hardly no one's talking about it. Hardly no one.
On projects connected to the tournament. As the World Cup got underway, some black migrant workers have taken on highly visible roles in a country where they're often invisible, part of the workforce, but not the society. Kenyan traffic officer Dennis Kamau, handing out red and yellow cards, entertains fans, and has attracted global media attention. And 23-year-old Kenyan Abubakar Abbas has become a viral megastar as Metro Guy. Organizers even brought him out to address fans before the England-USA game. But advocates for migrant workers dismiss these as isolated cases and empty PR that hide a dark, exploitative work environment.
As we speak, we still have people not getting paid. People are still living in cramped conditions. You have people still facing physical, verbal, sexual assault, discrimination.
He just said sexual assault as well. These are the things that they're dealing with here.
We still have people not getting paid. People are still living in cramped conditions. You have people still facing physical, verbal, sexual assault, discrimination, long working hours, working conditions, horrible working conditions.
He also said that some people are not getting paid. Like this is capitalism at its finest. Over-exploiting people, not paying some of them apparently, discriminating against them, making them work long hours, giving them limited breaks. And over 400 to 500 have died.
Malcolm Bidali was a security guard in Qatar, but says he was detained for advocating for migrant workers' rights.
I am very worried and scared and concerned when the World Cup ends, because like all the media, spotlight and everything else will, shift and move away to the next big thing.
Qatar says it dismantled the previous restrictive migrant labor system, which has been criticized across the Gulf for exploiting foreign workers from Africa and South Asia and taking away their passports. But critics say the reality has not changed. Jeffrey Owino was a safety inspector at Lusail Stadium who...
See, they'll mention the words exploit. They'll mention the word exploit, but they'll never mention that capitalism is the problem. And that's not just CNN, that's all of it mainstream media. They'll mention how these workers are exploited. They'll mention how these workers are discriminated against, but they'll never say that this is the problem with capitalism.
Which has been criticized across the Gulf for exploiting foreign workers from Africa and South Asia and taking away their passports. But critics say the reality has not changed. Jeffrey Owino was a safety inspector at Lusail Stadium who believes he too was deported from Qatar for speaking up for migrant workers.
This is the fear a lot of immigrants have, that if they speak up, if they tell people what's going on, or if they start complaining about the way that they're being treated at work, that they will be deported. This is why a lot of times they won't say anything. They'll just tolerate the abuse. And a lot of these CEOs, they know that. That's why they pick them. That's right, Desert Mantis. Same in the US. Absolutely. Same thing here. And I've seen it happen. I've seen it happen. When I lived in South Carolina, one of the restaurants that I worked at, one of our dishwashers was undocumented and was treated pretty horribly. Now, my manager was fired. That's a whole other story. But was treated pretty horribly. All of us saw it. All of us talked about it amongst each other. Like, man, that's messed up. They're treating him like that. But he wasn't going to complain because, again, fear of being deported. Crazy stuff, man.
African migrant workers complain of exploitation despite all these changes Qatar says it's put in place.
On paper, the laws are very good, but implementation and goodwill from the government of Qatar is the problem. That's why workers will continue complaining until a framework, a robust justice system is put in place, whereby violators of these laws against migrant workers.
Hold up. Golden silence. Sabby, if you want to expose exploitation of workers, we need to look in the USA first, and then we can go down the line. Yeah, we talk about USA workers all the time on this show. We just had the railroad workers on this show. Let me go back a little bit. But that doesn't mean I'm not going to talk about workers being exploited internationally either. If that's what you're looking for, then this is not the show for you.
Problem. That's why workers will continue complaining until a framework, a robust justice system is put in place, whereby violators of these laws against migrant workers are punished.
Jeffrey says he receives complaints and distress calls from migrant workers all over the Gulf, desperate to return home. Organizers of the Qatar World Cup have told CNN that they do not victimize any migrant workers and certainly don't detain them just for speaking up. And the country has reformed its labor law since 2020, but everybody we speak to...
Of course, they're not going to admit to doing that. They're not going to say, yes, we're not giving people enough breaks. Yes, we're not paying some of these workers. Of course, they're not going to say that. They're going to defend the company. Come on, man.
Organizers of the Qatar World Cup have told CNN that they do not victimize any migrant workers and certainly don't detain them just for speaking up. And the country has reformed its labor law since 2020, but everybody we speak to tells us it's not been enforced and it's not being implemented to the same extent that the country says. In fact, one migrant worker described the condition for us as sort of like being in modern-day slavery, Kristen.
There you go.
Horrible, but thank you so much for your reporting. Larry Madowo, thank you so much.
That's exactly what it is. That's exactly what it is. Now, one of the gentlemen in the video there had on a shirt called Migrant Defenders, and I want to show you that really quickly. This was one I forgot to add in there. Sorry, I'm trying to hide behind. Okay, trying to see. Yes, migrantdefenders.org. Eric, if you can put the link to this in the chat, just in case people want to take a good look at this. But here's the website here. About us. They were inspired by a multitude of labor violations, exploitation, verbal, physical, and sexual assault, complacency of embassies, and the general lack of awareness surrounding the suffering of migrant workers in the Middle East. Migrantdefenders.org was formed in 2022 to step up, rise to the occasion, and address these issues head on. And they have a mission statement here as well, advocating for migrant workers' rights. So here's an example here. I was a security guard in Qatar. I spoke up about migrant worker rights. Whoops, sorry. I think it moved, which led me to get arrested. I don't regret anything I did. That's from Malcolm. And these are different stories here. But that's the thing. This is why a lot of times they don't say anything, even though they're being mistreated, because they're afraid of what the retaliation might be. So definitely check out that site if you want to see more. All right. Desert Mantis, migrant workers face the same conditions worldwide. At Kid, Sabby, Olympics and World Cups are similar in how the workforce used to build or support the events are treated and paid. Yeah, some of these events, you guys, like the Olympics is a big one. It's a big one. At one point, they wanted to bring the Olympics to Boston, and you know, the city pretty much voted against it. Was like, we just don't have the We don't have the hold on. We don't have the infrastructure to host an Olympics event here. We just don't have it. So, which reality is true, we don't. If you think traffic is bad now, imagine what it would be like if anyway. Angela says, definitely need to talk about this story. This is some straight up Hunger Games BS without the good times. Blue Moon, how much do you want to bet when the World Cup is in North America, there will be no hoopla over migrant rights? That's a good point. I'll take those comments on Rockfin. Thank you so much for the tip, Roger Meadows. Sabs, I understand kinfolk in SC are conservative on issues regarding guns, abortion, LGBTQ, patriarchy, and everything is church. But are they conservative when it comes to single payer? Measures to narrow the income inequality gap, tax the rich policies. That's a good point. Most people that I have spoken to said that everyone should have health care in this country. That being said, they don't necessarily think it should be Medicare for all. That's the catch there. Also, when you said he won't even fight against his own party, I'd argue it is harder to fight against your own party. That's why I say get rid of them. There you go. And thank you for this tip as well, Sobi. I'm so disgusted with Bernie Sanders. He's the biggest con artist of my lifetime. I supported him as well as donated a ton of money and my blood to this fraud. Never Bernie. That's a big part of the, same sentiment there, Sobi. I donated a lot of time and money to Bernie Sanders too. I feel you. Thank you for the super chat, Laugh66. Thanks for covering this, Sabby. Thousands of poor people died to create this World Cup. 6,500 to 15,000 dead, reported only on Indie reporting. That's crazy. It's crazy. It really is crazy. I mean, I'm not trying to destroy the World Cup for you. I hope I didn't kill it for you. Is basically what I'm saying. If you like watching the World Cup, but I'm sorry, but those things you need to know. You need to know these things are happening. All right. So Ryan said about 9:10. So I think I can fit in this FTX story. Let me make sure I'm on the right tab here because I got a bunch of things open. I mean, I do all these clips. That's a lot of clips for that guy. For those who are not aware, I covered this story about Sam Bankman, who was the former CEO of FTX when that collapse happened. So I covered that story. If you haven't seen that, please go back and check that because it breaks down everything a lot better. But last night, Sam was arrested. Let's go ahead and get into that clip because I have some things to say about the timing of the arrest.
Samuel Bankman-Fried, the former CEO of the now bankrupt cryptocurrency exchange FTX, was arrested in the Bahamas today. That's after federal prosecutors in New York filed criminal charges in a sealed indictment. A source familiar with the charges told ABC News that Bankman-Fried is facing a multi-count fraud indictment. This just 1 month after the company filed for Chapter 11 after once being valued at $32 billion. The exact charges are expected to be revealed tomorrow when the 30-year-old is due in court. Bankman-Fried is expected to be extradited back to the U.S.
Hi.
So that happened last night. Now, it's really interesting when I say the timing of his arrest, because for those who are not aware, Sam was actually supposed to have a hearing with Congress today, and he gets arrested the night before he's supposed to meet with Congress. I don't know. Call me crazy, but the timing is a little bit suspect. And speaking of the timing, AOC had some questions about the timing as well. Now, here she is here, and she is questioning John Ray. Now, John Ray is now the new CEO of FTX. So she's questioning him here about his arrest. Guys, you listen to this.
Thank you very much, and thank you for coming here to testify today, Mr. Ray. I have a lot to get through, so we're going to try to get these answers as quickly as possible. I want to put together a little bit of a timeline of this collapse between...
Eric, can we use volume booster? I think this one is a little low. The volume's really low. Ed Kid, you're not crazy, Sabby. It's the system.
Thank you very much, and thank you for coming here to testify today, Mr. Ray. I have a lot to get through, so we're going to try to get these answers as quickly as possible. I want to put together a little bit of a timeline of this collapse between November 12th and yesterday. On November 2nd, we have CoinDesk leaking these balance sheets. On the 8th, Binance signs a non-binding letter to acquire FTX, and Bankman-Fried freezes or pauses withdrawals from FTX. I would like to submit to the record your declaration to the U.S. Bankruptcy Court, or FTX's declaration to the U.S. Bankruptcy Court that was filed yesterday. Now, on November 9th, the day after those assets were frozen, Binance announced it would not go through with the purchase. And according to this filing, the same day, Bankman-Fried emailed the Bahamian Attorney General with an offer. That offer stated that he would offer to unfreeze withdrawals just for Bahamian customers on FTX, quote, so they can tomorrow fully withdraw all their assets. Correct. Is that correct?
Yes.
Now, on November 10th, FTX DM, the next day, was placed into a foreign provisional liquidation in the Bahamas, correct?
Correct.
The next morning. Now, after that, Bankman-Fried then made good on his offer, on his previous day's offer, in that email to the Bahamian AG, opening withdrawals just in the Bahamas for a period of 25.5 hours. Is that correct?
Correct.
Now, during that period, $100 million was withdrawn in the Bahamas from FTX by 1,500 individuals, correct?
Correct.
And this was the day before you were set to take over. So he was still in control. This was like right before he was supposed to hand this off. Now, I think what we have here is that, or rather afterwards, on November 12th, we have what Congresswoman Dean was just asking about with this additional minting, these questions around this additional minting. And then on November 16th, the Bahamian appointed joint provisional liquidators did something very interesting. They came here to the United States Bankruptcy Court and sought an entry to recognize the Bahamian liquidation as the main foreign proceeding. Would that additional control be of any potential value to Mr. Bankman-Fried for that Bahamian proceeding to be the main one?
Well, clearly, there seemed to be an effort by the Bahamian Commission to get control of the bankruptcy process, and I think that was evident by their filing, which, by the way, was made up in New York, not Delaware.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for that correction.
I wouldn't even, John Ray at this point, I don't know why he would want to be, maybe he didn't have a choice, but I don't know why he would want to even be CEO of FTX at this point. Because like I said, Sam was the former CEO, but I don't know, man. I got to say something really quick before we get back to the video. You know what's going to end up happening, right? This case right here with FTX is going to be used as the example for the US government to come in and try to regulate crypto. Because of this whole catastrophe with Sam and his craziness. I predict that's what's going to happen.
Now, did you uncover any evidence that demonstrates that this window, that 25.5-hour window, opened in exchange for any consideration offered to Mr. Bankman-Fried by the Bahamian Attorney General or any state official, including a promise to initiate liquidation proceedings which might offer a path towards Mr. Bankman-Fried retaining some control or influence over FTX.com?
We intend to investigate that very thing.
Thank you very much. Now, I'd like to dig into a little bit of the timeline of yesterday.
Uh-oh.
Yesterday, you filed that same declaration that revealed some of this explosive information. What time did you file this?
That was late.
Around what time?
Yeah, 3 or 4 o'clock.
Around 3 or 4 o'clock. Now, when you...
Around 3 or 4 o'clock. Now, remember, I told you he was arrested last night. Well, at least last night, our time. He was arrested last night. Right after I got off the live stream last night was when I saw it pop up. Breaking news. Sam Bankman has been arrested in the Bahamas. So just keep that in mind.
File this information, that requires, that essentially discloses that you are sharing this information, and it discloses that to opposing counsel, correct?
Yes, we docket it and the world knows about it.
Now, if opposing counsel essentially becomes notified of this, that would mean that Bankman-Fried and potentially Bahamian officials would have been potentially privy to that information starting around 3 or 4 p.m., correct?
Correct.
What time was Mr. Bankman-Fried arrested yesterday?
I believe it was in the early evening hours after 4 o'clock.
I believe it was
7
around-
o'clock, perhaps.
It was in the evening after that filing.
6, 7 o'clock, yes.
I would like to submit to the record the statement from the Attorney General of the Bahamas issued yesterday on the arrest of Mr. Samuel Bankman-Fried. And after submitting that to the record, I would like to note that in this statement, they stated at such time as a formal request for extradition is made, presumably by the Southern District of New York, but they do not state when that request for extradition was made. Do you believe that information is important for us to understand in order to piece together a timeline, Mr. Ray?
Yes, sir. I certainly don't have that full timeline, and that's something that we look forward to learning.
Thank you very much.
This was supposed to be Samuel Bankman in this seat. But again, because he was arrested last night, that is why he is not there. Now, I told you this guy, he donated to Democrats and to Republicans. Other people are involved with him. Now, Case Study QB has a clip here. I want to show you some of the people that he did donate to. Check this out.
Now Congress is brought in and Sam Bankman-Fried tried to ingratiate himself with political players in ways that I think now draw more scrutiny if Congress doesn't act to regulate cryptocurrency.
Right, $37 million.
See, what I tell you, this is where they were going with this. Now they're going to try to regulate crypto. And so where do I fit in with the crypto piece? Those of us that are creators and are also on Rockfin is crypto. It's not like YouTube. YouTube has Google AdSense. They actually just deposit the money that you get from the ads and the super chats. It just gets deposited right into your bank account. Rockfin, however, is crypto. So you have to go in. They have a Ray token. That's their version, the Ray token, and you can transfer it over to a different one. So like USD coin is the one that I typically would transfer over to. Then you have to convert the crypto into cash. The difference here is that usually what I'll do with Rockfin is I'll let the crypto sit for a while. When you let it sit, it can accumulate. It's always accumulated for me. Then I cash it out. And I never cash all of it out. You always want to leave some in so it can continue to accumulate, right? That's important. Now, if they come in and start to regulate crypto, I don't know what that could mean for a lot of us. You know, I think maybe there should be some regulations in place so that something like what happened with FTX does not happen again. But at the same time, there could be limitations that are implemented so that maybe you don't earn as much as you're earning now. Who knows?
In contributions to the Democrats, about 240 grand to the Republicans, including one of the senators on the far right there, Bozeman, who wrote the bill that Bankman-Fried likes.
Right. Pause right here. These are some of the people that he donated to. Representative Lucy McBath from Georgia, Representative Shontel Brown from Ohio. Of course, Shontel Brown would be there. Of course, she would be there. Representative Robert Garcia from California. And here's Republicans as well. Representative John Hoeven from North Dakota and Representative John Boozman from Arkansas. Boozman, that's an interesting name. From Arkansas. Just wanted to point that out so you can see some of the people that he donated to.
Senators on the far right there, Bozeman, who wrote the bill that Bankman-Fried likes, a sort of regulation light.
But I think it's important to also underscore that it's been acknowledged that Bankman-Fried also used non-public channels to donate money to Republicans. And there really are two big picture problems and questions here. One, Congress has not shown an adaptability to deal with cutting edge technology in any sort of sophisticated way. And that has
No, they haven't. Do you guys remember when Mark Zuckerberg actually had that hearing with Congress and he was trying to explain to like senators how Facebook works? And it was like, I think that was an eye-opening moment for me because I'm just like, have none of these senators ever used Facebook in their life? Because the questions they were asking him is like, well, how does Facebook make money? He was like, well, we have ads. And they're like, well, how do you have those advertisers? Do people pay for the ads? Like, no, the ads appear on Facebook. That's how Facebook makes money. But it was just funny to me that they didn't understand it at all. Like when it came to the technology, I thought that was pretty funny.
Applied to content moderation, foreign interference on platforms, and now to crypto. So there's a real competence question in terms of what can they do. But secondly, look, this guy was in there saying to Congress, look, hey, you can have some of my money. Also, here's a great way to make a lot of money without a lot of rules, right? There's a lot of people in Congress who actually are sympathetic and interested in using this platform. And the ones who have fewer scruples than, I'm impressed John Tester was out there kind of with that message of like, hey, this is not necessarily real. We shouldn't endorse it, because many of his fellow members of Congress do not have those scruples. And there's a lot of questions about whether they're willing to do what needs to be done because they want to take advantage of it themselves.
This has really been a catastrophe, this whole issue here with FX. Now, I do want to show this piece here. Financial Times, you should follow them, you guys. If you have the opportunity to do so, you do have to pay for the subscription. But I get a lot of useful information on here. So they go into detail here and say Bankman-Fried, I don't know if it's Fried or Fried, Bankman-Fried charged in one of the biggest financial frauds in U.S. history. Like I told you guys, they said like this fallout was worse than Enron. I don't know how many of you remember Enron, but that was a huge to-do. Now it goes on to say, did I not click on it? Yeah. Cookies. Why is it not? Oh, I have to sign in. I forgot about that. I may not get to all of this. I forgot I have to sign into Financial Times. It's gonna take me forever to sign in. Good Lord. There we go. Sign in with Google. Oh, this was all set, man. Like, I didn't have to sign in earlier. Maybe it's because I looked at it on my phone. Now I can't even get into here. Oh, screw it, guys. Now it doesn't even want to let me. Yeah, it doesn't even work. Their thing doesn't even work. Try it again. Oh, misconfiguration in the system or service outage. Well, that sucks. All right, well, good thing I have a backup. And I just told you guys good things about Financial Times, and of course it just stops on me. Of course, that's what happened. But also Fox News talked about this as well, and I want to show you how people talk about it differently. I'm not going to play the whole video because it's a little too long. There we go. I guess you guys are not going to check out Financial Times now. But I want to show you guys how Fox Business also was
Disgraced
talking about
FTX
this.
founder Sam Bankman-Fried arrested in the Bahamas last night, all happening hours before he was set to testify before the House Financial Services Committee today. Reporting that he's facing several charges, including wire fraud, securities fraud, money laundering. The SEC.
Oh, Eric, can we make this a little bit louder? Thanks.
Announced that they will be charging Samuel Bankman-Fried as well with defrauding investors. Prior to the arrest, SBF hired Ghislaine Maxwell's defense attorney, Mark Cohen. Joining me right now is Georgia Congressman and member of the House Financial Services Committee, Barry Loudermilk. Congressman, it's good to see.
This is another part that was funny, too. They hired Ghislaine Maxwell's attorney. How well did that work out for Ghislaine Max? Let's go back into it.
See you. Thanks very much for being here. What is your reaction to this? You were about to interview him under oath in your committee today. Where does that stand?
Well, Maria, good morning. This is something that the timing is just unbelievable. Hours before he was actually going to make an appearance before a congressional committee, he is arrested, which right now I doubt seriously that his attorneys are going to let him testify at all. And I'm sure he was lawyered up before. He's probably even more lawyered up now.
Do you think that he should testify? Do you guys think that he should testify, that he should come to the stand? Because he just said the attorneys are probably not going to let him do that. What do you guys think? I think he should. I think he should have to respond. I think he should have to answer for what he did.
And it's quite disappointing for those of us on the committee because there was a lot of information that we need to go forward because of the significant interaction he had with Congress. He was in the halls of Congress lobbying, believe it or not, for a crypto regulatory bill that his company never would have been able to comply with. And so there was a lot of information that we need that we're probably not going to get at this point.
Well, what did you want to know? Tell me about some of the questions you were going to ask now as you see these charges from the SEC, defrauding investors, wire fraud, money laundering. What were your questions situated around?
Well, a lot of my questions are going to be based off the testimony that we would receive from John Ray this morning, which that part of the hearing is going to continue, but especially from the testimony, the written testimony that he had presented. How in the world did you run a company that you're supposed to be this self-proclaimed genius that you don't even have proper accounting of your funds and your assets? And another question I wanted to get to is, where was the SEC during all of this? How come the SEC hadn't picked up on it if this was such blatant violations of financial regulations?
You'd be surprised. I've seen a number of intelligent people that run their own companies that don't seem to have proper accounting set up. It does happen. Just because someone is intelligent or someone has great ideas doesn't necessarily mean that they're always the best when it comes to common sense.
Were they asleep at the wheel? What was going on with the SEC during all this? Are they too focused on woke policies against companies in the United States that they're not actually doing their job?
Well, that's a very good question. So the hearing today will now only feature.
He had to bring the woke part in there. Woke has nothing to do with this. Woke has absolutely nothing to do with this situation at hand.
The current CEO of FTX, John Ray, he plans to tell the committee that he's never seen, quote, such an utter failure of corporate controls at every level of an organization, Congressman. What are you expecting to ask John Ray, and how will this further your investigation?
Well, fortunately, John Ray has been very cooperative, and so we want to dig a little deeper into how did all of this happen? What has he found out so far? And more importantly, what are the chances that the investors will ever see any of their money back? They're under bankruptcy. They're going to go for the creditors first to make sure that they're made whole or partially whole. But what if
they may not see any of that money back? There's no guarantee they're going to get that money back. I'm so glad I did not participate in this. I'm so glad. I wouldn't have done it anyway, but I'm so glad I did not trust this guy. I did not participate in this scam.
About those investors? What about the customers? Is there any chance that they're going to see any of this money? And, you know, how is he going to proceed with finding out what really happened with the billions of dollars that suddenly disappeared in the amount of about 10 days?
Where did all that money go? That's the question. Like, where did the money go?
Yeah, it's a great question. And earlier, Dagan mentioned some of the other big blow-up stories that we've covered. Dagan, if I remember correctly, you mentioned Tyco, you mentioned others, Enron, and at the end of the day, it's the equity investor typically holding the bag. I don't know if you're going to recover any of that money. Jump in here, Dagan.
Right. A lot of these frauds were exposed by prosecutors in very interesting ways. With Tyco, it was originally Robert Morgenthau, the Manhattan district attorney, who focused on, I believe it was like tax fraud at Tyco.
She said she believes it was tax fraud.
By the CEO, I digress. But Congressman, there was no regulation for the most part of crypto because regulators, lawmakers, politicians, they didn't want to end the party, just like with TikTok. You know, the kiddos are having a blast trading crypto, getting rich. Or adults, you know, TikTok, nobody wants to stop the festivities there, but it could have and should have been regulated and stopped. The Federal Trade Commission, in fact, deals with consumer fraud. You cannot go out and say a can of paint covers 400 feet and only covers 200 feet. So I think that everybody in Washington, and correct me if I'm wrong, needs to take a long look in the mirror and ask themselves why you didn't step up to stop this. Gambling is regulated in this country.
Well, kinda. There are other ways. I'm sorry, but there are other ways that people get around that too. It's supposed to be regulated, but there are ways that people find a way around it.
But not this. Crypto was treated as, and still, quite frankly, like a collectible, like baseball cards and digital Beanie Babies. I keep saying this over and over again, but that's why it was lightly regulated, if not regulated at all. So everybody keeps wondering why this fraud happened. Well, y'all are part of the problem.
Well, this is something that we have been looking at, is what level of regulation.
She has a pretty deep, I see you guys saying her Southern accent. She has a pretty deep Southern accent. And I'm actually surprised by that because typically in broadcasting, typically they want you to kind of have like a newscaster accent. At least they did, like when I was in undergrad, like they had us work on our accent a lot. So I'm surprised, and she has a deep Southern drawl.
Do we need in crypto now? To be clear, there was laws and regulations in place, or he wouldn't be indicted at this point or charged with criminal offenses. But there being an exchange, there is the responsibility of the Securities Exchange Commission is that there are regulations being in an exchange there that those obviously the oversight and the investigation of SEC was not there and was not adequate. And on the Republican side, we've been looking at what is the right regulation that we should be putting into crypto, and more importantly, which agency should be regulating.
So here are the charges. I told you guys, it's not just one thing. Wire fraud, conspiracy, securities fraud, conspiracy, and money laundering. So Sam is in a lot of trouble. Sam is in a lot of trouble. Sorry. I would not want to be him today. I do see Ryan's here. Ryan, if you're ready, give me a thumbs up. All right, cool. Hello.
How you doing?
I'm doing okay, Ryan. I just heard some upsetting news. I saw the article that you sent me. We actually just talked about that tonight with Bernie Sanders. Yeah.
Yeah. He kind of. We'll see. We'll see if he caved. Like if he comes back hard, and gets an agreement with Biden on something, okay. But like he has to redeem himself at this point. I think. Like it kind of balls in his court kind of thing.
Yeah, no, I agree. All right, guys. My special guest tonight is Ryan Grimm. He is a journalist and an author, and he's also the host of Counterpoints. Welcome, Ryan.
Hey, good to be here. Thanks for having me.
So we've been talking back and forth a lot on Twitter, and I figured it'd probably just be easier just to have a discussion.
Sure.
In reference to the railroad workers. Now, I did see this article that you published from The Intercept. This went into a lot of detail. It talked about the history of the railroad strikes in this country. And there was one piece here I wanted to comment on. Now, this is the strategy portion here coming from Mance. And it says, I was like, we want these 7 days paid sick leave. And they're like, okay, well, let's do something. And that's kind of where it began. Mance said it was just a last minute Hail Mary. It was pretty great how it all came together. He reached out to his national legislative team and told them about Bowman's plan. And I think that, number one, thanks for the article, because this did explain a lot more. I think the piece here is where I push back and say, this is where I wanted Jamal Bowman to explain to them that, listen, this is probably not going to pass in the Senate because, number one, we have a Joe Manchin. And I knew that Joe Manchin was not going to vote for the 7-day sick leave. And I'm not even in DC. But I felt like this is where there should have been pushback to give them some type of expectation in reference to, listen, this is probably not going to pass. And I wanted to get your take about that.
Yeah, and this is where I was hoping like the conversation would go, that where people could understand what the different strategies were and then debate which strategy made more sense, rather than trying to like figure out who's selling out and who's the scab, and like trying to get to like what is Bowman thinking, because like a lot of people are like, I understood immediately like that why that one vote would make people think like, wow, Jamal Bowman's a scab. I didn't know he's a union breaker. Like that's crazy. So then you're like, well, what's going on here? And so here's what's going. So exactly. So now you know like what his office was thinking at that point. So from the perspective of the union workers, and I think this is kind of broadly speaking in Congress, a lot of these organizations that are trying to get stuff done through Congress, they don't mind losing votes if they think they're going to be close and if they think they're making progress. So I actually worked as a lobbyist for medical marijuana back in 20 years ago, when I first got out of grad school. And we used to every year have this vote called Hinchy-Rohrbacher, which it was an amendment to, I think like the DEA's like appropriation bill or something. And the amendment said, and it was a Republican and a Democrat, Dana Rohrbacher, who became a crazy like Trump guy. I don't know if you remember him from the Trump years. Interesting dude though. He went to go visit Julian Assange. And so he's pro pot, like really interesting. He's like a surfer, like total weird libertarian, interesting dude. Anyway, so he and a Democrat every year would do this. Every 2 years would do this vote, and what it would do is it would say the federal government can't spend any money enforcing drug laws, pot laws in states that have legalized medical marijuana. And every year they'd go back and they'd have this vote, and every year or every cycle they would get 20 more or 30 more. And then they would have a list of the people that they lost, and then they'd go back and they'd lobby them. Occasionally they would try to primary somebody. They didn't have a lot of money. But you make an example out of one or two people, and then all of a sudden you get 50 more votes the next time. And then you get closer and closer. So organizations don't like, if they feel like they have momentum, like, and these railroad workers felt like at one point in November, they thought they had 10 to 11 Republicans. By the time the day of the vote came, they thought they had about 7. They ended up getting 6. They need, if you lose Manchin, you basically need 11 in order to get to 60. So for them, their argument would be, Jamal, appreciate it. We're okay with losing in the Senate. If we fight hard and we lose, we're okay with that because we want this fight. And we think we even have a shot at it. And we also want, if we can get 6 Republicans on, getting 6 Republicans on the record, then gives cover to Biden to do some executive action. Because it's very hard for Republicans to say, how dare Biden do this when Ted Cruz, Lindsey Graham, John Kennedy, et cetera. So that would be the argument for why the rail workers would say, I get it that you don't think we can do this, but like we've been doing our lobbying campaign, like that guy Devin Mentz that you talked about, mid-November, he and 25 other workers came straight from the tracks to Washington, D.C. and hit 107 offices and came out of it thinking they had a shot. So that would be the counter argument. But I understand if you want to say, look, or Bowman could say, look, have somebody else do it. Like, I don't want blood on my hands here. This is too messy. Have somebody else do this. So you could also say that. I think that there's value in the left acting as a big bloc, like with a mass-based organization of a union driven by its rank and file, then kind of calling the shots and directing a progressive bloc in the House. Like that to me is really the ideal kind of political economy that we want to set up, rather than a whole bunch of different individual actors who are just kind of making their own decisions. That's not really a left. That's a collection of well-meaning people who are just going to get rolled, but they'll make the right votes in the process of getting rolled.
Well, I think also the problem is the fact that the squad, at least those that are members of DSA, they're not supposed to be against anyone going on a strike. And now I understand that the House already had the number of votes and it was going to pass anyway. But even to that point, then I would add, well, then all the more reason for you to vote against it, because they can't point to you and say, you guys prevented this contract from going through, because they knew they already had the votes anyway. And
like
it
Rashida
also
Tlaib
looks,
did,
exactly. I was going to say, it also looks bad if you have someone like Rashida Tlaib, but she knew the right thing to do when she did it. And it just kind of speaks volumes to the squads. What is their purpose at this point in time in DC? And I think that's where, for a lot of us, that's where the frustration comes from. Now, I'm not sure if like how all of us at RBN, how we started. We were activists before we were podcasters. When I started this show, before I joined RBN, I started off interviewing other activists like myself and progressive candidates. I moved away from interviewing progressive candidates because I just could not, I couldn't chance disappointing people once again. And I have to say, all of those candidates that came on this show, I really did believe that they really want change. They really do have good intentions. But the problem that they run into once they get into DC is that they realize that those parties are both corporate. They're going to answer for their donors. And Cynthia McKinney explained this to me very well when she was on this show. She said that Maxine Waters told her back in the day, when Democrat leadership tells us to do something, Cynthia, we're going to do it. And then they're up against that. And I feel like if someone really wants to implement some type of political change, you have a better chance of doing it on the local level. I lived in Ayanna Presley's district. She was more effective as a city councilor here in Boston than she is right now. And this is the thing that I like to point to, that they would have been better off on the local level. Cori Bush could do a lot more for her district at home. AOC could do a lot more for her district at home, where they don't have to butt heads up against people like Nancy Pelosi or now Hakeem Jeffries. Like, this is always going to be a struggle. And we just saw, and I want to share, screen share the article that you just sent to me, because we just talked about this earlier tonight with Bernie Sanders. It's like, I don't care what Joe Biden told him to do. Bernie Sanders is supposed to push back against these corporate establishment Democrats. And here we see now he's trying to cave to this. Like, I don't understand why this is an argument to bring some type of resolution in Yemen. This shouldn't even be up for debate. And what we want is someone like Bernie and the squad members to push back like they're supposed to and stop caving in because they're afraid.
Yeah. Yeah. This was a real disappointment coming from Bernie. And I think from what I was able to gather in the reporting leading up to this and the weeks leading up to this, I don't think he had done a lot of, over the years, obviously, he's been very good on this issue. And nobody's questioning his motivations. I don't think he did a lot of legwork in the last several weeks or the last several months, kind of rallying support for this among his colleagues, which means like making sure that all the different senators are briefed on what the talking points are going to be from, let's say, the White House or from other opponents of this, so that when the talking points come, people are ready. Or getting people like Chris Murphy came out today saying he was with Bernie on this. Like, if you get Chris Murphy a couple of weeks ago, and Chris Murphy, who's a much more kind of moderate Democrat, he chairs the subcommittee that oversees Yemen, so he's like got a lot of pull on this with his caucus. If it's Bernie and Murphy out there taking meetings, working with their colleagues, then when the White House comes at them, they might be able to withstand more pressure. And I don't have any evidence that he did that. Now, the other problem, Bernie's just one person. He was doing the sick day fight last week. The week before, he's spending his time fighting Joe Manchin's effort to get that dirty deal into the NDAA. Like, this is a busy old man in the Senate. So where does he find the time in the day to like do the things that I'm demanding he do? But you're right. Like the left does not have the kind of power I think that people would have hoped by now in Congress. And I made a point last time I was on with your colleagues that like I think a lot of people want like a Kshama Sawant. Yeah. I had said like they want a non-crazy version of a Marjorie Taylor Greene, somebody who like a non-crazy, non-racist, non-psycho version of her, who's gonna, because she'll like stand up to her leadership. She's like, championing what her base wants. And that's not really, for the most part, like what the squad is or what Bernie is at this point.
But I question, I question, their level of commitment here. And so I've spoken to Bree about this as well, is that I personally feel like they should be removed from DSA. It is not a good look for the organization. They have to come out and make apologies for the way that they have voted. Meanwhile, praise Rashida Tlaib for doing the right thing. And I just want to show you, these are a couple examples because I want people to understand it's not just this one particular issue. Mm-hmm. These are DSA principles. When it comes to the workers, the right to strike for all workers. It doesn't say everyone except for the railroad workers. When it comes to issues in foreign policy, stand in solidarity with the Palestinian struggle against apartheid, colonialism, and military occupation, and for equality, human rights, and self-determination, including boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement, BDS. But yet we see they're not even support, with the exception again of Rashida Tlaib, who is Palestinian. They are not supporting the BDS movement. Maxwell Frost originally was and then backed away. I think does Omar support BDS? I'm not sure. She wavers, like she goes, she supports the idea, but not the specific. I'm not sure. Yeah, she wavers. Build an anti-war movement that opposes U.S. intervention, including sanctions. They're not upholding these policies. When it comes to policing, which is something those of us at RBN are very passionate about, defund the police by rejecting any expansion to police budgets or scope of enforcement while cutting budgets annually towards zero. They're funding the police. They're voting to fund them. Cori Bush doesn't even speak about defunding the police anymore. So for me, this is a big problem because, again, when people are looking at DSA, who do you think about? You think about people like AOC. They think about people like Cori Bush, Jamal Bowman, and they're not upholding those principles. So my thing is, it makes the organization look bad because it makes it look like you guys aren't brave enough to say something to these politicians that are a part of this organization. They're not upholding the principles. The same can be said for Justice Democrats as well. I went over all the Justice Democrats principles. They're not supposed to be voting to send money, weapons to other countries for war. That is one of the first principles of Justice Democrats, and they're doing it. They're supposed to come out in support of Edward Snowden. That is also a Justice Democrats principle. I would add Julian Assange to that list as well. Yet when you ask them these questions, Ryan, they can't even comment on it. It's an easy answer. Like, do you support Julian Assange being freed? Yes or no? Ilhan Omar is the only one I saw say something about it. But it's just, this is not what they were brought to DC to do. The assignment of Justice Democrats was to go in and to push back against the corporate Democrats, a hostile takeover of the party. I remember this all so well. They're not completing the assignment, but then they get angry when people like me criticize them. What else do they expect us to do? We have no contact with them at all. We have no access to them. They don't go on to independent media anymore for the most part, which is the only reason why I even knew that any of them were running. This is why we say, when we say they sold out, this is what we're referring to.
I think it's accurate to say that there's been this really big split between the independent media, mostly on YouTube, podcasters, but mostly YouTube, right? I mean, and with a Twitter presence that like drives people, back to them. I think, yeah, it is accurate to say there's been a split since 2020, maybe like 20 around, probably coming out of the Sanders campaign, and with as the squad and as Bernie start working very closely with Biden during the end of that campaign, getting on, I forget what he called those committees. He put together a climate committee that had like somebody from Sunrise and AOC on it, and he had other committees helping to staff the thing that Bernie was very integral in, because he endorsed Biden within like 2 days in order to like get that going. And then it got darker and the gap got wider after that. I think that's totally accurate. I've like lamented that, and that's one reason that I like constantly engage, despite the fact that it brings me nothing but grief like all day, because I don't want there to be such a gap, and I want there to be at least an understanding on both sides of what the different sides are saying.
Yeah, I think it's just that the problem that what I've seen, at least in the Twitterverse, the problem that a lot of us see, though, is that it seems like every time we try to critique them, you come in pretty quickly to defend them, at least on Twitter. And I think what a lot of us would want from you is to some of those same things that you just said here tonight, and some of the same things that you said on like Bree's call-in, we would like for you to say those things to them, because you're the one that has access to them. We don't. And it just seems like you're kind of there to run cover for them. And as long as people like you keep defending them, they're not going to be held accountable, and they're not going to change. They're not feeling that pressure because they can easily ignore or avoid us. But when the people who have access to them don't push back on them or say, no, you guys are not doing your job, that would be different, I think.
No, I have, urged a bunch of them to like try to appear on independent media, and I don't mean me. Like, and I've said that publicly. I've said that privately. I have pushed them to do that.
And what did they say about that, Ryan?
There's all, and you can ask Bree about this. Like, I think I was getting, as she said, we were getting close with one of them. But probably, we'll see how that goes. Because I think what's the harm? Like, what
Right.
How, like, what could go wrong? Like, how bad is it going to get? It's not going to get worse. I mean, maybe maybe it could get worse, but I don't know what that looks like. So yeah, so I've done that, and if I disagree with them, I'll hit them like on the Capitol Police stuff, Iron Dome stuff. But if I think that people are misunderstanding what's going on, I don't mind jumping in, even though I know I'm going to get my head bitten off. It's fine. And like, so in this case, and often I don't quite realize like what I'm jumping into, but I don't mind anyway. Like in this case, I saw a lot of people being like, why on earth would they do this? Why? Like, why would they do that? And so I'm like, so then I realized like, oh, I haven't, like, people don't realize that these rank and file union folks have been like pushing this strategy all week. I've been reporting on it all week. I've been talking to the workers all week. I knew that. Like, so I'm gonna share this context because people are asking why. Now, some people are like, well, I don't care why. It's just wrong on principle for any reason to have cast that vote. And that's a respectable, principled position to take. Other people are like, why'd you do this? Here's why they did this. So, yeah, like I hope that I hope there is more engagement, going forward. We'll see.
Yeah, I think we should let them explain why they voted the way that they did, because otherwise you end up looking like their defender. I noticed that AOC did respond to like one of your tweets, but again, notice she only responded to you. Like, that's the thing. What about all the people who canvassed for AOC? What about all the people who phone bank for her? What about all the money that a lot of us donated to AOC and the rest of them? I mean, they can't just continue to pretend like we're the reason why they're
Right.
in office, because we did the groundwork. And so I think when you have like these activities on the outside, because I always say you still need that pressure from the outside, right? Oftentimes what I have seen is yourself and some of your comrades kind of coming down on activists for those of us trying to organize on the outside. And I'll give a couple examples. Force the vote, straight from the DSA handbook. That is something that they are supposed to be doing in reference to Medicare for all. Chose not to do it. Not even one of them came to the town hall. They could have at least sent one. My students would do this thing where they'd send one representative that was going to speak for everybody to come talk to me. They could at least do that, right? So they didn't do that. Also the issue here with, I said force the vote. Also the issue with general strike. So like last year at RBN, we hosted a general strike summit. And you did it too, Ryan. Like, you and some of your colleagues came in and you guys were like criticizing us before it even happened. And the whole point of that summit
Was that the Medicare for All march?
Well, there was that too, but we were part of that too. But everybody just came in criticizing and attacking us. And I'm like, guys, the point of the summit is to explain to people the reason why we need a general strike. So we had activists, union organizers, all these different people come on to explain different categories as to why we would need one, and things that we've tried in the past that apparently are not working. The Medicare for All march, I was going to that one as well. There are a lot of people in this space that I consider to be leftist or progressive that said they were for Medicare for all. And all of a sudden they were so angry with those of us who were the activists who wanted to march for Medicare for all. It just, the gatekeeping in this space, it's ridiculous. And it's interesting to me because I do feel like people like you guys can come and attack activists, but you don't want to attack the politicians who are supposed to be doing what we're out on the ground doing anyway. So I just don't understand that. And I want to hear from you like about that as well.
Yeah, I don't think there's any chance that I attacked Medicare for All march like that. People want to organize a Medicare for All march. I think that's great. Like organize Medicare for All march. I would have covered it. I was in Vermont. There was no Vermont Medicare for All march where I was. I would have gone and covered one if like I was still in DC or if I was in a city where what was happening. I don't remember saying anything negative about the general strike. What did I do?
I do.
I'm not saying I didn't, but do you remember what I said?
You said that on the lines of something of it being foolish and that people aren't ready for this. And we weren't saying go general strike right now. Like, we were just having a summit just to educate and talk to people about it, because I'm sorry, but you know who is having a sort of a general strike right now is the UK. The railroad workers in the UK just went on strike along with the nurses. So it's just they're building across like different industries going on strike at once, which is what we were saying to do here. So it's not a crazy concept. I just think that people in this country, especially those politically involved, they believe the only solution is through electoral politics. And I think if you look back on movements in history, we would know that's not necessarily true. The women's movement, the civil rights movement did not happen through electoral politics. So I think this is a big part of the problem. It's like when we're organizing those events on the outside, it doesn't look well when someone who has access to the squad and we're trying to get them to come to that event. Cori Bush was the only one who showed up to the Medicare for All March. It doesn't look good if you criticize our actions too, because then that's going to make them think this isn't worth their time.
Yeah, I don't remember criticizing the general strike. I take your word for it though, and if I did, I was probably salty about the force to vote stuff. If there was any proximity to that, 'cause that was one that just utterly spiraled out of control in my mentions for like months. So I think a summit. I do think that people need to understand what's involved in not just a general strike, but even a strike. Like as you saw in that story about the railroad workers, like there are tons of rank and file railroad workers who their big concern is that they're not ready for a strike. They got so many conservative, disorganized, unorganized members, like they feel they're worried they would lose one quickly. And that there needs to be a lot of bottom-up organizing to get to a place where you're ready for even individual strikes, let alone your general strikes. But that doesn't mean that a summit on a general strike is a bad idea. So I shouldn't have said that. Assuming I did, I'm sure. I say a lot. So
yeah, I think some of these things are crushed because of personality differences. We try to do actions and activities and people will get mad because there's a podcaster involved that for whatever reason half the left does not like. That's not serious people to me, because if you're trying to organize, you can't just say, I'm not gonna. What if Chris Small said, I'm sorry, but I'm not going to do this because this person is involved and I don't get along with them? That's not how organizing works. So I think that people need to stop focusing so much on the different personalities, because when you do that, then people aren't focused on the core problem. The core issue here with the railroad strike, or the railroad workers not going on strike, is the fact that we do not have paid sick leave guaranteed for everyone in this country. That is the core issue. And during this time, when we still have inflation, homeless population has increased, is continuing to increase. Even where I live in Boston, there's still tent communities in the winter. People are dying. People don't have health insurance, and poverty has not been fixed by electoral politics. And it's really upsetting to me that people are so willing to just throw the workers under the bus, to throw the American people under the bus in order to defend their favorite politician who's a member of the squad. That I can't have. Like that I won't do. I will not jump in and defend politicians, because they're really supposed to be working for the people. But obviously we see that's not so much happening. But it's gotten to the point now where I think a lot of the squad members, they were put on such a pedestal when they were running for office, that now it's like, if you criticize them, you're a bad person, you're evil, you're a right winger or whatever. I'm like, no, like they took money from working class people, Ryan. I was on the ground. I saw them take money from people who really didn't have it to give. And for them to just sell us out like that, I'm going to be vocal about that, because that's not right.
I feel like in this case with the rail workers, I don't think that they betrayed anybody. I don't think that they sold anybody out. But I do think I think there's plenty of permission to like attack them. I don't do you sense that if you criticize them, you get called like a right winger or whatever? Maybe we're all more sensitive to our negative mentions and negative replies and negative comments and negative feedback than we are sensitive to the positive. But I sense that you're in a large community of people if you're criticizing the squad today. Like I don't see any shortage of like allies online, at least in that thing. But I just genuinely don't think that what they did as part of this was a betrayal of the rail workers.
It's a betrayal of their principles if they're members of DSA and if they're Justice Democrats, because you're not supposed to break up strikes.
Yeah, that's something for DSA to sort out. You know, Jamal Bowman got caught up in a big argument among DSA members who they wanted to boot him for was it the Iron Dome vote, and then also this is where it gets weird. Like he visited Israel with, was it J Street or some kind of progressive Jewish organization?
Right.
Might have been J Street. And they wanted to kick him out for that. And it's like, well, I mean, if you're meeting with like resistance activists and like seeing like the occupation up front, like kick him out for that. I think if they wanted to kick him out for the voting for like military spending, that they would certainly be within their rights to do that. But then there's this entire faction within DSA which seems to have won that argument that says no, it's more valuable for him to be in DSA, and so then you get caught up in those arguments that are as old as time,
right?
Or as old as the left, at least.
Right. And I think what I've seen happen is that because they're not doing these things, you know what's happening? People are pulling themselves away from DSA. DSA is losing members. People are leaving the left and they're going towards the right. I know people this time around had never voted Republican and they voted Republican. The Democratic Party, and I think David Sirota mentioned this. I have to pull up that article. But David Sirota, I believe, was the one that mentioned recently African Americans leaving the Democratic Party, choosing to vote Republican, particularly African American men, by the way. And so this is the problem when we have people like AOC and the squad that get in, and they said like, yeah, this is going to be like the left Tea Party, and they see them just go along with Joe Biden or Nancy Pelosi, like these corporate Democrats. Well, then the Black working class is like, oh, hell no, I might as well vote for the right. And so this is the problem that's happening. It's pulling people away from the left and making some people vote Republican.
Which predates them. Like you started seeing it, 2016? And I think actually, curious for your take on this, I think you started seeing it trend in that direction, maybe starting in the 2010s. But because Obama was president, in election years, you still had the same level of Black male support for Democrats that you had, in previous cycles. But then you take Obama off the ballot. A lot of people stay home in 2016, and some also switched over to Trump. So this is definitely something that's been happening. I think part of it is the idea that Democrats were ever going to keep like 90+% of any demographic forever for a very long is like defies kind of political gravity. The Black church has for so long been, as I'm sure you know, a real driver, not just of like getting out the vote, but of building community around the fact that you're a Democrat. And that's for a lot of young people, young men in particular, that's disintegrating. And so people are then, I think, going to just vote more like everybody else and start sorting around. And so if I think you're right, if Democrats can't find a galvanizing force to say, that's what I believe in, then they're going to be shedding people,
abandoning working class people, and I think it just, granted, this time around, I think Roe v. Wade that brought some people out was Roe v. Wade and canceling part of the student loan debt. But see, even that wasn't done right.
Yeah. Right. They should have gotten that through Congress. Yeah. They could have gotten it through Congress if they would have done it through the IRA. they could have gotten that done legislatively, and then a judge can't block it. But yeah, they didn't.
Well, he was told last year, February last year was when it was Elizabeth Warren, Chuck Schumer, and Ayanna Pressley. They were the ones that brought this forward. And I read through all of this. They specifically told him to do it through the Higher Education Act. And he did it through, forget the name of it, but he didn't do it through the Higher Education Act. He did it through it was the COVID policy. And you can't use that now because we're not in a state of emergency anymore, right? So obviously it was going to get struck down. But if he would have done it the way that he was told to do it, we wouldn't have been in this situation. So when I say things like, man, maybe he just did this to set it up to fail, it's just because I'm following the dots, like, of what he was told to do and how he chose to do it instead. And even with this issue here with Russia and Ukraine, I mean, this is too much. How much more money are they going to send to Ukraine? And it's not just weapons. They've been sending them in these packages include healthcare and clean water. We don't have that for everybody here in this country, but they're sending it to people in another country. So that's where a lot of the frustration comes from. There's just not, when it comes to like the working class, we have been forgotten about. Like a lot of people they don't care anymore. And it's not right. It's not fair. And it almost just kind of feels like the politicians that we put in that they said they were going to fight for the working class people, they don't seem to care about working class people anymore either. They're in. And so I think when you have people that are progressive, so to speak, right? When they get into DC and they betray like the rest of us, it really makes the whole movement look bad. We were talking about Kyrsten Sinema last night. Did you know Kyrsten Sinema used to be a progressive politician?
She was like an anarchist activist. Yeah, she was like Code Pink. She was in an affinity group, like protesting like presidential conventions. She was hardcore. She was,
That's right.
And then she was Green Party.
Yep.
And then she's just been on ice straight across. Yeah.
That's right. She got into DC and then she changed. So it's a big part. That's a big part of the problem.
She changed in, what is it, Phoenix? What's the capital? My daughter would know this. What's the capital of Arizona? When she, like, from what I heard, when she was a state lawmaker, she was already starting to shed that. Like,
yeah, well, not as bad as she is now,
which is great. No, not as bad, but that's like when it began, which is even crazier because the Republicans in Arizona back then, complete nutshell, like insane people. Like if you remember, those were the ones that were really the tip of the spear on the anti-immigration stuff. Just total like right-wing psychos. And so she got into the legislature with them and was like, oh, that looks reasonable. And she's been on a guide path since then.
Yeah, shout out to Bree. Bree's here in the chat. He could have done it by executive order immediately, and a judge also wouldn't have been able to block it. So that's another thing. Like, I think, Joe Biden knew what he could have done. And it's just, we see what's really happening here. But I think when we're looking at strategy going forward, at this point in time, based on everything that's happened, do you feel putting progressives through the Democratic Party is still the best strategy?
I do. And I understand that there's a huge audience that thinks that is crazy. But if you look at what happened over the last couple of years, including $350 billion, in climate money, yes, a lot of it. Also Manchin got some of the things that he wanted in that. That's absolutely true. But without the kind of left Greens, the Sunrise Movement, some of the Justice Democrats getting elected and like kind of forcing the Green New Deal onto the presidential, into the presidential campaign, where you get almost every Democrat endorsing it. The only one that didn't was Biden, but then Biden's kind of actual climate agenda that he ran on looked very similar to the Green New Deal. And then you get hundreds of billions of dollars for climate. Like that's not nothing. Plus, the Green Bank that they created could end up being leveraged into, the whole thing could be leveraged into trillions of dollars over the next 10 years in climate spending. American Rescue Plan that Bernie forced $600 a week extra unemployment into. the $300 checks that, $300 monthly childcare checks, which then Manchin, forced to end. There's a lot of other, good stuff in that Inflation Reduction Act. Will Biden, under pressure, take marijuana out of Schedule 1 in the next year or two? Like when he did the pot pardons, he also instructed the DEA or whoever to explore whether it should be taken out of Schedule 1. Which, if you do that, then pot shops can get access to banking services. Will there be progress made on psychedelics and other kind of therapeutics in the drug space? There's a lot of things that I think are moving in an okay direction, while the whole world is also collapsing at the same time. So I still think that there are gains to be made by fighting. But I also think people should fight inside the Republican Party. I think a mistake a lot of people make is to just ignore Republicans. They're becoming much more susceptible to pro-worker arguments because their rhetoric is so far in front of where they are. There's this massive gap between what they say they stand for and the fact that they're now getting 50% of the working class and what they actually do. That gap is space for activists to really push them in that direction. So it doesn't mean just focus on Democratic Party. The entire system needs to be pushed.
Well, I don't think they're really, in reference to the Green New Deal, for example, that came from the Green Party, and the Democrats watered it down compared to what the Green Party had. When it comes to some of those
and also, I'm not
the child care and stuff like that. I don't have kids, so that didn't help me at all. I mean, it's things like that. And I think that those examples that you mentioned to me,
it might have helped you if some parents could afford childcare, and then those parents could go out and work and do stuff for you and for other people that grew the economy. That might have been helpful.
But those examples aren't big to me. Those are just crumbs. They could have done so much more. When it came to even the stimulus checks, they should have given people monthly recurring stimulus checks during that time. They weren't going to go that far, but they can increase the defense budget. So the money is there. They just don't want to give it to us per se. I disagree. Obviously, I'm sure I don't agree with the strategy of putting progressives to the Democratic Party. I think I'm looking at how can we pass progressive policies fast and make them more effective. And I've only seen that happen so far on the local level. And it's not just blue states like mine, it's also red states. South Carolina expanded Medicaid. Nebraska passed $15 minimum wage. We can't even get the Senate in DC to pass the $15 minimum wage. Not to mention, there were 7 Democrats and 1 independent that voted against it. So when I look at the progressive policies, these things are passing on the local level. Oregon decriminalized all drugs. Here in Massachusetts, we passed 15 minimum wage years ago. Last year, we passed paid family leave for everybody in the state. We just passed the millionaire tax that Bernie Sanders used to talk about all the time. These things are happening on the local level. And I honestly think people like the squad would have been more effective on the local level in their districts than they are in DC at this time. So that's my question. Why is the majority of Americans that is participating in electoral politics, why is everybody focused on what can happen on the national level, especially if you live in a ballot initiative state? Why aren't people organizing on the local level and getting these things passed locally? North Dakota would be a great state for Medicare for All to get that started because they have a public bank. So when people come to me and they say, oh, if you pass single payer in the state, it doesn't matter because the federal government can come in and shut it down and say, no, we don't have the funding. You get around that by having a public bank. So these are the kind of things I feel we should be talking about more. Why are people doing this stuff locally? We do it in Massachusetts. That's why we got a lot of these things. But this idea that it's going to be on the federal level, all or nothing, is not getting us anywhere.
Yeah, I wrote a fun story recently about how Dunn County, Wisconsin, passed a kind of, which voted for Trump by like 15 points, passed a resolution calling for single-payer health care nationally. Like they're like even if you can't enact policy, you can express yourself in like a shocking kind of way in ballot initiatives like that. I think that's a great way to spend people's energy. I don't. The answer to your question is probably there's more drama in the national stuff and the federal stuff. The personalities are bigger. People are following the storylines. But it is important because A, there's so much money at the federal level that's getting fought over. B, the federal level can undo so much of what goes on at the state level. If you look at like what, say, Georgia Republicans do and constantly try to do to blue cities like Atlanta and elsewhere, like, just saying like you can't pass minimum, like look at Texas, like they'll tell Houston you can't do this, and they'll tell all these towns like what they can and cannot do, like, which is utterly hypocritical because Republicans are supposed to be all about local control, but when they get power in state government, then they tell the cities that they can't actually enact any laws. I live here in Washington D.C. We don't, our own laws have to go through Congress. Basically, Congress has to they can veto anything they want, and we pass some great stuff that Congress is like be like no, and the congressman, it'll be somebody from Kansas who's like rejecting it. But I'm with you on that. Like I think the more focus on that, the better. And also then that trains people and teaches them skills that they can take wherever they want. Like if they decide they want to move up.
Yeah, I mean, it's in what you said about DC, that actually pushes the point for DC statehood because you guys can't make those decisions.
Yeah,
that's another thing.
They should have done that on day one. Yeah. They'd have 2 more senators.
Yeah, no, it's 100% too. But I think I just wanted to explain like where we're coming from, because I think sometimes people just see us as contrarian or like we're just a doomsday people or whatever. I just want to be honest with people in the fact that if you don't get corporate money out of politics, out of electoral politics, we'll keep running into this issue over and over again. And it's a big problem because it's true. The majority of the congressmen and senators, they are corporate. They do take corporate money. And so what are you going to do when both of those parties are owned by Wall Street? If we didn't have corporate money in politics, we would probably already have Medicare for all in this country. It's embarrassing,
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Yeah. Just to do Obamacare, Obama, cut all these deals with these giant industrial groups. Like, yeah, doing anything in Washington runs you up against just enormous amounts of corporate power.
Right. So within saying that, you still think it's good to have progressives go through the Democratic Party?
Because I mean, if tomorrow the Democratic Party gets replaced, that's great. Fine, like do that. Like that to me, that's kind of secondary, because like you said, like the structures and the corporate power that produce the outcome that we have that's coming from corporate power, not coming from like, the parties are like the parasites and the corporate power is the host. Like, so if you change the names of the parties, but you still have a bunch of corporate influence in Washington, then the new parties are going to become just like the old parties. That's because of that doesn't, and a third party that like pressures the Democrats to move to the left, it can be an effective thing. But a third party that took over for the Democrats without changing the kind of fundamental structures that make up our politics would just become like the Democrats within like a year. What's that Bakunin quote where he's like, if if the most ardent revolutionary took power in a year, he'd be worse than the czar if you don't change the kind of structures.
I think one of the ways to change the structures, and I'll end with this. I love the fact that people are trying to unionize across this country. I think it's great for like labor movement. At the same time, I will add, I think that should not be the ultimate goal. The ultimate goal should be worker co-ops. And if we have more people push these unions into worker co-ops, and that was one of the things with the railroad. I think at one point they were trying to make that public and not privatized. We have more people participating in worker co-ops. That's how you can break that cycle. And we're so dependent, I think, on our employer with a lot of our employers, and we don't own anything. Most of us that work, we don't own a piece of the company. But I think that's where we really need to move towards is worker co-ops.
Yeah, sounds good to me. Sounds good
All right.
to me.
Well, Ryan,
Great, yeah, great
go
to
ahead.
chat with you.
Thanks so much for coming on. I hope I wasn't too harsh.
No, not at all. Hey, not at all. Yeah, happy to talk whenever you want. It's part of comes with the territory. It's okay. And I'm gonna make mistakes, and if I do, people need to criticize me for them. If I don't think I made a mistake, I'm gonna tell people I didn't, even if they're convinced that I did. But sometimes I'm like, you know what, you're right, I did get that wrong. I don't think I did this time, though.
All right. Well, Ryan, thanks so much for coming on.
Yep, you got it. Talk to you later.
Bye. All right. Let me go into the chats. Okay, guys, we are still going to do call in. Eric, you mind if I take just a quick break? I think we still have to go through super chats, and I think there is one comment on Rockfin. I think there's one comment on Rockfin. If we can do that. Thanks so much. Thanks so much, Eric. Let me just pop myself back.
All right. All right. How's everybody doing? That was quite the interview. I think it wore Sabby out. So we're going to have, keep an eye on things here. So we're going to give Sabby a little break, and then I think she's going to jump right into the call-in. So let's see. Yeah, so the call-in tonight is on what we just saw, interview with in Sabby's conversation with Ryan Grimm, and we want to hear what you think. Now we got a whole bunch of comments. Let me see if I can power through a bunch of these. Let's see. Some of these go back to some of the previous story about Bankman, saying, yeah, Bankman donated millions to Democrats, and Tory saying they feels like they arrested him to keep him from talking. Let's see. We've got this super chat from Golden Silence. Sabby, do you realize migrant workers in Arab nations don't get buried there? They have to be flown out in coffins and cost 3 times, 4 times, 6 to 15K. Thanks for that. Thanks for the super chat, M. Smith. Crypto is regulated. They're defined as an MSB, like MoneyGram, Western Union, etc. Each state also has their own regulations. All right. Thanks for that. Thanks for this one, Jonathan Bustamani. Ryan Grimm believes he can gaslight everybody. Bad faith actor making a lot of money. And we had JB Font in the chat chiming in. Bernie's inaction or acquiescence to the Biden regime tells us everything we need to know about him. We had Roger Meadows. Thanks for this super chat. Ryan Manchin is one person as well, yet he is more effective. I think talking about how when Ryan was saying that Bernie was just one senator. Thanks for the super chat. Angela writes, refuses to call them out. They sold out. And And thanks for this super chat, Golden Silence. Ryan Grimm, who are you kidding? Change your title, Ryan Grimm, the staunch defender of the squatters in Bernie. How do you sleep at night? You've no shame. And thanks for this super chat from Jonathan. What the actual F? Super chat from Ad Kid. Thanks for this. Our Grimm not doing anything to help everyday folks, only providing cover for Dems. AOC squad, why? Grimm, after first the vote, you revealed and played yourself. And thanks for this from Golden Silence. Squatters need defenders like Ryan and TYT. And thanks for this one. Very generous chat from Debo the Black Panther, saying, of course you don't. I'm sure we're responding to one of Ryan Grimm's comments. Thanks for this, Angela Wright. The railroad workers said they have been betrayed. Yeah, that was a thing that I thought of too. Is Sabby had railroad workers on her show, and they sure weren't saying that they liked what Congress did. And I mean, from what I saw, the railroad workers voted to strike, and Congress said, sounds like strike breaking to me. Thanks for this, Colin in the chat. Ryan, too little too late for an apology. From Laughed 66, thanks for this. Don't bring Grimm on if you're not tearing him apart. And thanks for the super chat. Golden Silence saying, liar, liar, pants on fire. Check your pants, Ryan. And we had Bad Faith in the chat. It's good to see Bree in there. And Sabby noted that one earlier, saying that that Biden could have done a lot of the stuff by executive order. Let's face it, Biden, there's no shortage of things that Biden could be doing by executive order, and he ain't. Why is that? Thanks for the super chat, Mary Ann Cummings, saying, for your persistence through this maddening interview. Thanks for that, Mary Ann. And thanks for this super chat, Golden Silence, Ryan. That wasn't Bernie's demand. Stop lying. And also from Golden Silence, Ryan Grimm, stop lying. Bernie got us nothing. And Golden Silence was hitting the chats tonight. Thanks for this one as well. Ryan Grimm, chief gaslighter for the fraud and Bernie. And here on the board, we had one also from Roger Meadows. Thanks. Ryan just made the case to abolish all parties. All right. Good chunk of chats there. I feel like I'm doing my Steph Zamorano impression, kind of trying to power through these. We did have also, let's see, we have add that in. We had a chat on Rockfin. Let's just hit that one. Thanks for this one, Dave Burt. It's a good idea for reporters to ask the government real questions. Definitely agree with that one, Dave. And I actually met Mr. Dave Burt at the rally in Boston on Saturday, and it was good to meet you there, Dave. I know we didn't have much time to talk, but it was good to meet you. And it was good to have it was good to meet up and do some protesting. Yeah, so let's see. Let me look at my notes. Like from the subject at hand, I think maybe one of the new catchphrases we maybe need to throw out there was I was in Vermont, which seems to be Mr. Grimm's answer for why he didn't have any coverage or anything to say about the March for Medicare for All rallies. So what do you think, Sabrina? Is that a good excuse? I was in Vermont.
I mean, Bree came to the one in Maine. You know, I mean, it's just.
I guess if you're in Vermont, you just don't hear things.
The level of promotion that we could have received for that, you know, I mean, you know.
Do they have internet in Vermont?
Huh?
Do they have internet in Vermont?
It depends on where you are.
I think they do.
It depends on where you are, to be honest. I go up to Vermont every year, but still, it's just like, we need to have like those types of things heavily promoted, and the only really large channel that promoted it was Jimmy Dore, and all these other channels were so silent. And I just, you know, the amount of people we could have had if AOC and them had even just tweeted about it.
Mm-hmm. So you're going straight into Colin from here?
Yeah. Let me go ahead
All
and
right,
put the
then
link.
I will just wrap up my comments by saying that I think one of the things we need to be doing is just calling out members of both of these duopoly parties corrupt. I think it doesn't get said enough. I think it's simply the case. They are corrupt. They are in it for the money. I think we need to be clear about that. And I'll throw in my usual thing. I think we need a clear set of demands to point out why their answers are BS and why they're corrupt.
That's right.
All right.
All right, guys, we're going to go into call in. I got 1 minute. We're going to go ahead into call in to discuss episode 62, Ryan Grimm interview recap. Why do I have the word clip there? That's weird. Given the recent article and interview from Ryan Grimm, what are your thoughts on the railroad workers fight? Have your thoughts changed, etc.? And feel free to talk about whatever else we discussed tonight as well. The link is pinned to the top of the chat. So I'm going to go ahead and head out so I can open up the room. All right, guys, you know how we do this. Have a good night. Keep up the fight.